Raise your hand if you've ever been busy. Raise your hand if you've ever got tired and feel like you just need a couple days off. Most people would have both hands up right now. That's our world, fast-paced and income-driven. That's why we get caught up in our own lives so often, and that's why it's understandable when most people don't focus on worries that aren't their own. So what makes someone become a humanitarian? Someone whose whole life focuses on the welfare of other humans.
When you go back and you see kids that were living on the streets, kids had no structure, they had no routine, people who had nothing, they didn't have meals. When you see that they're all of a sudden they're waking up, they have structure, they have something to do, they have a meal in their belly, their life changes completely. They like I said, their self-esteem changes, their self-worth, their ability to know who they are in the world and what they have the potential of becoming. You know, to give that hope, to give that dream, and then to watch people actually use that to do good for themselves and others it's amazing. It becomes an addiction.
And with Serena's help, we'll find the meaning of life to a humanitarian.
Friday, everyone. Your real worth isn't defined by your net worth. What makes you valuable is how you use what you have been given. All of us have gifts. Make sure you're making the most of yours. Have an amazing Friday.
It is now the bottom of the hour. I'm excited to welcome Nancy Matthews to our program today. Nancy is an author of a book. I'm going to go ahead and highlight it in the carousel for you guys. There it is, The One Philosophy. I want to talk to Nancy not only about the re-release of the book, but also what it's been like for her to share the message with all of you guys. Nancy, great to have you on with us.
Hello, hello, hello. So happy to be here.
Good morning. Bonjour. Comment ça va? Et toi? Ça va bien. Ni hao. Hola. Ohio. Buongiorno. Bienvenue. Wan Ying. Bienvenidos. Benvenuta. Yokoso. And welcome. Welcome to our longtime viewers. Thank you for viewing. Welcome to our new viewers, people I just met. Thank you for coming to the show. My name is Barry B. Mixon, and I am a gemological storyteller. And each and every week, I get the amazing opportunity to take you on a journey to places you've never been before, to hear stories you've never heard before. Each week, I get the magnificent moment to take you on a mental, physical, and spiritual adventure into the art, science, history, and magic of gemstones, precious metals, and fine jewelry. The whole history of mankind is affected by gemstones, either directly or indirectly. So what I do is I take those stories, thousands and years of stories, and I take those stories and I help you, and I use them as a bridge, as an inception point, as a beginning, to help you begin your journey of discovering the value of your stories. We talk a lot about stories on this show, and the reason why we talk about stories is because of what stories mean. Barbara, go ahead and bring up my screen. What stories are. So today's title, for the title of today's show is The Elegant and Beautiful, the Hypocrisy of Gemology. Now, I know that sounds harsh, and it's not that type of story because we're going to use stories in a different way. The reason why we talk about stories so much, and before we even get into it, I just want to let anybody know I've gotten quite a few people who are interested in the Rashad Melee watches. They are still available to you. This is about $1.2 million. For those of you who watch the show regularly, you can get a discount. We'll take $100,000 right off the top. And those of you who are interested in the top level, upper level of the Rashad Melee watch, $2 million for you just today. Call in today or text 1.8 million for you as a viewer of the Gem Hunter stories. But let me get serious again. Once you understand stories, once you understand how stories work, then you can use that power. You can use stories to do anything you want to do with stories. Because stories equal power. When you understand how stories work, stories have a certain pattern. All stories have a certain pattern. There's certain pieces that have to come together. And the biggest thing that I got out of this book, and those of you who know my background, this is the book that got me out of homelessness. The thing that I got from this book, As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, is not only just the power. When they say as a man thinketh, it's the stories. It's the stories. I saw a incredible movie the other day, Nope, by Jordan Peele. And I'm not going to tell you the story. It's just basically, it was magnificent. All 7 elements of a story was in that movie. And the thing that I kept thinking about as I was watching this fantastic movie, and it's sci-fi horror, so I'm not even into horror, but it was just beautifully done, is the fact that this story came from someone's mind. Jordan Peele, you look at it, it was written and directed by Jordan Peele. So this came from his mind. This gives you an example of what the power of a story. And when you understand stories, you get to use it any way you want to. You can become your director in your story, the character in the story, the lead character in your story. You can even become the villain, as many of us are, in your own story. I told people, and a person I know, a viewer, was saying to me a few weeks ago, "Oh, Barry, why do you always talk about Darth Vader? You're not Darth Vader." Yes, I am. For many, many decades, yes, I am, because that story of Darth Vader spoke to me. And when I saw what he did with his power, that's what I wanted to be, because of the anger that was inside of me. And I also learned in that same story that you can change the story in your mind. That's what As a Man Thinketh talks about, the story that's in your mind and how that story manifests in everything that you do. Now, some of us don't know our stories, thus the purpose of this program. So if you don't know your story, what you can do is you can use stories from other things. And it's those stories of other things that you can use as a template to help you figure out your story. When you understand stories, you can literally be anything you want. Anything. Within reason. I would love to dance for the Bolshoi Ballet, but unfortunately, they don't take 61-year-old, 250-pound guys. So, but the spirit is there, the story. If I wanted it, I know that the way to get there would be to tell myself a story. Now, there are two things. When you understand gemstones, there's really only two main types of gemstones. Gemstones come in a variety of different characteristics, a variety of different traits, a variety of different structures. But when you look at gemstones, just in its most basic elemental level, you're talking about two types of gemstones. You're talking about gemstones that are either allochromatic or idiochromatic. And we've talked about this before, but I want to take it in a slightly different direction, because this is really important. This was when I began to understand and see the significance of, or the analogies that you can take from gemstones and apply them to people. It started really from here on a scientific level. And I'm going to show you how that works today. So for those of you who haven't been watching the show, know that allochromatic, let's go back to 8th grade science. This is the periodic table. And for those of you who forgot your 8th grade science, or just science in general, and I'm not going to get too deep, but this is the periodic table of elements. Everything that we know about the universe is on that table. 118 elements. Everything that's around you. You know how in church they say, look to your left, to look to your right. When I'm going to ask you in this church, I'm going to ask you to look all around you and think about anything that you want to think about. And that thing that you thought about is made out of those elements. Let's just start from there. Well, let's go back to what chemical elements that the body is made out of. And I know this is kind of small, but basically oxygen, 65%, carbon, 18%, hydrogen, nitrogen, calcium, phosphorus, sulfur, sodium, chlorine, magnesium, and a little bit of trace elements. All of us, our basic structure, who we are, is made up of those elements. Mostly oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen. So let's go back. The periodic table has all the elements of the universe. Everything that we know about the universe is in the periodic table. And of those 118 elements, we are pretty much made out of about 6 of them. 4 if you really want to talk about percentages. Now, of those 118 elements, the things that make gemstones, that give gemstone its color, that give gemstones its value, is what's called coloring elements. Coloring elements: titanium, vanadium, chromium, manganese, iron, cobalt, nickel, copper, and boron and nitrogen, especially when we talk mostly in diamonds. So I need you to understand that before we go into allochromatic and idiochromatic. So recap: 118 elements in the universe. Of those 118 elements, we as human beings are made up about 6 or 7 of them. All right. And so are gemstones. Gemstones are made up of everything in that periodic table. We particularly just have those 6. And then the things that make gemstones special are these elements. Some of them are part of us. Manganese. Look at your cereal boxes. Look at your vitamins. Manganese. Iron. Those women, when you have iron poor blood, you take pills. Those are the same elements that are in gemstones. Cobalt, nickel, even copper, nitrogen. So all these elements that are found in the universe, those elements that are found in who we are also elements that are found in all gemstones. So that's the base that we're working. That's the platform, the foundation that we're working with. So let's go from there. An allochromatic gemstone is a gemstone that the coloring elements are not essential, but they are present only as an impurity. So let me show you let me break that down into layman's terms. An allochromatic gemstone is a gemstone that has a basic structure. It has a basic foundation of what it is. So when you're talking about this is a ruby, when you're talking about a ruby, you're talking about a structure that is aluminum oxide. That's it. That's what a ruby or sapphire is made out of. Aluminum oxide. That's what it is. I think oxygen is like the third most abundant element on Earth. And inside of us, 65% of who we are is made out of oxygen. Aluminum, not as much, but that's so there's part of the similarity. So a ruby or a sapphire, which is a sister stone, is made out of aluminum oxide. This is the structure of aluminum oxide. That's it. That's all it is. Aluminum, 2 aluminums and 3 oxygens. 2 aluminums and 3 oxygens. That's all it's saying. That is the the molecular structure of a ruby or a sapphire. That's what it looks like. This is a sapphire. That's what it's made out of. And an allochromatic gemstone is a gemstone that has the basic structure, aluminum oxide in the case of ruby and sapphire, and then you have to put something in it. You have to put something in it in order for it to become a ruby, in order for it to become a sapphire. So when you're talking about a ruby, you're talking about putting in chromium. So when you put aluminum oxide with a hint of chromium, I'm always saying like that because I just imagine God just mixing all this in his universal pot and putting just a hint of chromium. And that's what gives it the red color. When God decided to make sapphire, he or she, as far as the way I think about it, put in just a hint of iron in titanium in aluminum oxide, and that's how you got the blue color. That's how you got sapphire. And depending on the percentages of iron in titanium, or sometimes chromium, those who have pink sapphires, that's because it has just a little bit more chromium in it. It's not a ruby. It's not a ruby. It's a pink sapphire. It has traces of chromium, even smaller, less than what is normally a ruby has about 10 to 12% chromium in it. So a pink sapphire has a little bit less, so therefore it's pink. So you have the structure, and it's what you put into it that allows it to interact with the light. And when I read that, I said to myself, well, how is that any different than us? How is that any different than human beings? Think about it. Let's go back. That a human being has a basic structure. It has a basic chemical and molecular and physical structure. Any person who's watching this, if you had a child, that child did not come out as a tiger. Yeah. Mr. Johnson, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, you're the proud parents of a tiger. And you hold the baby and the baby goes, roar. That didn't happen because the basic molecular structure of a human being, of a Homo sapien, consists of 99% of those elements are the ones that I listed. Oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen. Those are the elements that make up a human being. So we are, most of us are allochromatic. How is that any different than us having a basic structure of being a human being, and then we put something in it, and that something in it is called education? That something in it means good food. As a child growing up, you eat those elements, and those elements go inside of you, and those elements allow you to interact with the light, your skin, your hair, your nails, the shape of your body. If you eat more than what your molecular structure can handle, then that's what's going to manifest in your body. It's just that simple. If you eat chips all the time, or hot dogs, or something else all the time, then those chemicals that's in your food is going to manifest into who you are. If you go to a good school, you go to Harvard, you go to not even a Harvard, you just go to college. Those things that you learned, those lessons that were poured into your mind, into your molecular structure, manifest into who you are. You are a doctor. You are a lawyer. You are a teacher. You are a plumber. You are a bus driver. Those things that you learned that was poured into you, you manifest. You know what happens when you don't have iron and titanium in the or chromium in the molecular structure of a ruby, of what's called corundum? This is corundum. This is a white sapphire. Huge. This is the white sapphire. This is aluminum oxide with nothing in it. Now, it's synthetic. It's synthetic. This can be made easily in the lab and has been for God knows how long. So without the chromium, without the iron and titanium in it, in various degrees, this is what a sapphire looks like. What happens when you put a nurse? A nurse is a nurse because of what he or she learned, and that person manifests that training, that education each and every day. That nurse is an allochromatic gemstone. You can't, the hypocrisy of gemology is not the gemstones, it's the way we understand it. How is it that we understand that this sapphire, a ruby, is not a ruby unless it has something in it that is basic? A basic structure is aluminum oxide, and if it doesn't have chromium in it, it's not a ruby. If it doesn't have iron and titanium in it in various degrees, it's not a sapphire. So how is it that we understand that? This is law. This is not just like, oh, something that Barry came up with. No, if you go to the Gemological Institute of America, allochromatic is this. If you go to the Gemological Association of Great Britain, the first lesson they teach you is that. If you happen to be a student at the fine school run by Robert James, the International School of Gemology, that's exactly his definition of allochromatic. A gemstone that has a specific structure that when you put something in that, an element in that structure radiates something else. It absorbs all the other colors of the rainbow except the color that you're looking at, which is, right, this case, blue. So when you have a human being, notice I didn't say a Republican human being, a Democratic human being, a black human being, a white human being. All I said is when you have a human being that has a specific, and all human beings classified has a specific molecular and chemical structure. If you put something in that human being is going to manifest and interact with the light in a specific way. How do we not understand that as humans? A few months ago, we brought, well, actually last week, a few weeks ago, we introduced the first African-American woman to the Supreme Court. She went to Harvard University. Harvard University, I can say Harvard because Harvard is known throughout the world. So what her parents did was they had a child, a human being with a specific molecular structure that said that she was a female human being. And then they took the elements of schooling, they took the elements of perseverance, they took the elements of dedication, they took the elements of reading, they brought her to a place called Harvard. In all the schools she went to before that, she learned from that. And what she learned, what she embodied, what became a part of her molecular structure, she wasn't born with it. It was foreign to her. It was an inclusion to her basic molecular structure. And from that, she learned, and now she's sitting as an associate justice of the Supreme Court of the United States of America. So how is it that we live in a world that if you are a different color and you've had those same conditions, somehow your value is different than the value who has a person who has a different color, but yet the elements of who that person is exactly the same? That's the hypocrisy, because it doesn't work like that in gemology at all. When I found this, I told you guys a few months ago, I don't know how many episodes again, I found this. I was at lunch. I was talking to someone about what I did as a gemologist. I looked to the left and there was this whole trough of these stones sitting in a very nice restaurant. And I just happened to pick it up. And when I picked it up and I used my loop and I just looked at it and I said, wait a minute, hold on a second. And when I looked at it, I realized that, oh my God, I said, you know what this is? And she said, what? And I said, this is a sapphire. This is corundum. And because I could see, and I know the difference, I could see what would be in natural corundum versus synthetic corundum. I knew that this was a corundum, although it has no value because there's nothing in it. There's nothing in it. How is that any different than people? If you get on an airplane and you found out that the pilot, even though he has a uniform or she has a uniform on, you found out that they did not go to anybody's flight school. They just decided to just watch TV. They saw, I don't know, some show about flying. They said, I can do that. And you find out that that person is now, thank you. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Flight United 5906. I will be your captain. No, ladies and gentlemen, I have absolutely no flying training, no flight training whatsoever. I'm just a man sitting in a seat, and I know how to steer a wheel. But that's what we do. We would never do that to gemology. We would automatically say this is not a sapphire because it doesn't have a specific molecular structure and it doesn't have the things in it that qualify it to be a sapphire. So how is it that we understand the value of that, but we don't understand the value of each other? Allochromatic. Think about that. Think about all the things that you do in your life. And it's easy to talk about doctors, lawyers. Let's talk about mechanics. Let's talk about people who are bus drivers, people, garbage men. My brother is a sanitation engineer, a garbage man. My brother's huge. My brother looks like he can pick up dumpsters by himself. And he's good at it. He's great at it. He learned how to do it. And his molecular structure of who he is allows him to interact with the light. And for the last, I don't know how many years, over a decade, that's what he has been doing. And if I have a home and I want my garbage taken out, I certainly want my brother or someone like him to do it because he is an allochromatic gemstone. Why don't I see his value? Why don't I see the value of Dr. Fauci, one of the top virologists in the world? He's forgotten more stuff. So when he says something, because of the things that he learned from 30, 40 years of studying diseases, he understands how they work. He understands why they work the way, because he learned. He's allochromatic. Those things was inside of him. He learned it. And that's what you see. That's what you hear. So how is it doesn't have value? How is it that some people don't value him? Teachers. You take years of training to become a teacher. You learn how to do classroom management. You learn how to speak to teach. Those of you who work especially with little kids. Oh my God, moms, you understand. You got 30 little. I'm a great teacher, but I can't do little kids. At least not a whole group of them. Oh no. I don't have hair now. I would have even less if I worked with kids on that level because I didn't learn how to do it. I didn't learn how to do it. Therefore, when I'm in a classroom with a bunch of 4-year-olds, oh, it's over. It's over. I'm kindergarten, Arnold playing kindergarten cop. Ah! Because even though I'm a gemstone, I did not learn how to take care of that. I don't manifest with the light in that way. So go ahead. We're going to take a break. I can do this all day long. I'll see you on the other side.
I don't know this song.
My body becomes like a cement. Oh my God.
That was the better one. The song
Okay. Oh my goodness. It's like magic. Literally like magic.
Every time I see that commercial, it's like amazing. So we talked about allochromatic. Remember, the structure, something is put into the basic molecular structure of that gemstone, which gives it its color, which makes it interact with the light in a specific way. So next we're going to talk about idiochromatic. And there's so many of us have idiochromatic people in their lives. So I experienced one firsthand, so I want to tell you that story. let me go back. 2018, I was invited to my high school reunion to be the keynote speaker of my high school reunion. Hey, Jamaica High School friends and family. And I was honored because I didn't remember my high school really at all because of just issues I was going through, my mom, things of this. So I didn't remember high school. I remember 3 people in my high school, and that was it. So when they invited me to come, as the keynote speaker, they wanted me to basically speak about and honor the guest speaker. And the special guest was Bob Beamon. Robert Bob Beamon was the 1968 gold medalist in the long jump. Bob Beamon jumped 29 feet, 2.5 inches. When you look up Olympic.org and look up Bob Beamon, they literally say that Bob Beamon is one of the greatest Olympians of all time. Literally, they coined the word after him. It's called Beamonesque. Beamonesque this is not something I came up with. This is on the website. Beamonesque means a feat, an athletic feat that is so profound, so extraordinary that person did something that no one could even imagine that a human being could do. That is what Beamonesque did. That's what Beamonesque means. And that's what he did. Bob Beamon, long jump. He jumped 2 jumps, he disqualified because that was kind of what he did from time to time. He was a champion, but sometimes he was known to disqualify because he basically went over the board. Okay, there's a certain place and you can't go over that board. So he disqualified. He's at the Olympics. First 2 times in the trial, he disqualified. And one of his friends, Ralph, said to his fellow teammates, Bob, why don't you just jump a little bit further back? So he did it. He jumped, he qualified. The day of the finals, the long jump, 1968 long jump finals. He's going against 2 other champions in that field. Bob Beamon listens to his teammate, and he jumps earlier than he normally would jump. And he jumped 29 feet, 2.5 inches. And he stopped the world. Literally, he jumped so far that the machine that they had, brand new 1968 technology, the machine that follows the runner, the jumper, all the way to they land, that machine went off the rail. And they had to use tape measures to figure out exactly how far he jumped. It took like 20, 30 minutes for them to do all the calculations. And when they finally announced to the Olympic crowd that he jumped 29 feet, 2.5 inches, Bob Beamon, when he heard the announcement, he just fainted. He fainted. He couldn't believe that was something that he did. Now, here I am at this graduation. Bob Beamon is going to be there. I'm sitting there. I'm coming there. I came there early. I sat at my table. I was a keynote speaker. So I wanted to position myself in such a way where when they call my name, I can go to the lectern and speak. This gentleman comes in, tall, African-American, and it was a black tie affair or basically a black and white event. And this man comes in with a Hawaiian shirt on, a white jacket, cream colored jacket, and a matching straw hat. And I'm thinking, okay, somebody brought their crazy uncle to this event. He seemed nice enough. He was very quiet, I tried to start conversation. He was just and I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to move over there. So the event goes on, and they're talking about just the different things. And then they introduce our very special guest, Robert Bob Beamon. And I'm sitting there with my camera, and I'm so excited because I'm thinking, oh my God, this is the greatest Olympian of all time. He went to my high school. Oh my God, I'm going to meet this gentleman. He is here today. And they was going through his basically proclamation from the state of New York and reading it. And they said, now introducing Robert Bob Beamon. And it was like the sea parted because there was a group of people standing in front of his table. I didn't realize that. And when they parted, there, standing at the table, was Bob Beamon, the man that I thought was the crazy uncle, the greatest Olympian was all time. I was literally 1 foot away from him, and I missed it. I missed being with someone idiochromatic. When you have something that's idiochromatic is when you have a structure, a molecular structure, where what that thing is, the color of that gemstone is that color because it's built in. It's built in. And when you heard Bob Beamon, when he told his story, Bob Beamon said that he was functionally illiterate. He said he still doesn't read that well. You can hear the way he was speaking and stuff, that education wasn't necessarily his greatest attribute. Before the Olympics, he did the thing, before his event, he did the one thing that you're not supposed to do. He went out drinking and hanging out with women. And you know what I'm saying, hanging out with women. He was with a woman a night before, and yet he still was able to jump 29 feet, 2.5 inches. He is idiochromatic. It's in him. You know how Gatorade says, is it in you? Think about the people in your life who are idiochromatic. I'm thinking, I have a viewer, a friend who is she is a distinguished teacher in African American studies. And I'm floored by how much I don't know about African American studies when I hear her talk, because it just flows. It's like water. She is idiochromatic. I have a viewer who, the one that wanted that $2 million watch, she's a social worker. And I never really thought about what social work does, how it impacts with the community. And when I asked her how did she become a social worker, she basically told me it was like, what else is there to do? For her, she is idiochromatic. When she talks about social work, you almost feel like, man, that's what I should have done. Because it's a part of her. Mozart, who wrote his first concerto when he was 4, was idiochromatic. Yes, the man wound up being homeless. Yes, the man was broke all the time. Yes, he was in bad relationships. He had a horrible relationship with his dad. His mom died, and he died at 35 years old. But what he did with the music that lived inside of his heart and inside of his mind, he played it, in 220 some odd years later, when you still hear the music of Mozart, you're hearing it from a human being who is idiochromatic. Who he is was a part of him. That scene in Hidden Figures, the scene where the chalk was being given to Katherine Johnson as a little girl. I knew when you understand stories, I already knew the significance of that chalk, the way they handed it to her, because once you understand stories, you understand what's the next part. Where did that play? And I said to myself, watch, that chalk is going to have significance to her story. So they showed the teacher, and she lived in the South, and of course, racism, and the teacher gave her that chalk and said, Catherine, do you think you can do it? And she said, yeah. This little black girl. Years later, we see Katherine Johnson in a room filled with white men in the 1960s, extremely racist. She's sitting there, they're trying to figure out where John Glenn, the first astronaut in space, where was John Glenn going to land? You know, it would be nice to go into space and figure out where you're going to land. And none of them could figure it out. Oh, they wasn't sure. They was off by 100 miles, 200 miles. They didn't know where. He was going to land in the Pacific Ocean, and they didn't know where. And the mission commander played by, I think, Kevin Costner, gave Katherine Johnson, played by Taraji Henson, gave it to her, Katherine Johnson, as a grown woman, and said, Katherine, do you think you can do it? And she pulled down, she figured out all these mathematical equations from her mind. There was no calculators. She didn't have one of these. She did it in her mind. And she ultimately, once she figured it all out, she pulled down the slide, the map. She pulled down the map and said, he will land here, give or take a few miles. And I remember watching that movie and tears welling up, because that's when I understood what idiochromatic meant. Idiochromatic is that person who they are, what they do is who they are. It is part of their molecular structure. And my point is today, when you understand that, when you understand the story of who your friends, your family, your lover, your partner, when you understand whether or not they are idiochromatic or allochromatic, the whole story changes. When you understand your story, when you understand who you are, as I say all the time, the most important person that you need to tell a story to is yourself. I didn't even know who Katherine Johnson was until, and I've been to NASA. As a naval aviator, I've been to NASA. I saw Katherine Johnson, the name on the bill, and I thought it was a white woman. I had no idea that a person that looked like me was responsible for the space program. Idiochromatic. That's what peridot is. And what peridot is, those of you who are born in August, happy birthday. Peridot, this is your gemstone. Let me give you a fun fact about peridot. Peridot, the molecular structure of what it is magnesium iron silicate. That's it, boys and girls. That's it. And the reason why it is green is because of the iron. The iron is built into the molecular structure of peridot. So the only thing peridot can ever be is green. It's green. It is what it is. And when you understand, and those of you, let's go way back to 8th grade again. We talked about the different levels of the earth. Peridot is the only other gemstone on earth that comes from the same place that a diamond does. The mantle. The mantle of it. So we're talking about the hot part. We're talking about thousands of degrees. We understand. We always use analogies of diamonds. I want to be a diamond and all this other stuff. But nobody talks about a peridot. Peridot, diamonds are 10 hardness. The hardest substance on earth. A peridot is about 6.5 and 7. But imagine the analogy that you can make, that here is a gemstone that is softer than a diamond. A diamond, when you in the mantle, you're talking about heat. You're talking about metamorphic rock. You're talking about rock that is so hot and there's so much pressure. And despite that, a peridot still survives to become a peridot. It has less than what a diamond does, and yet it still became what it is. And please, thank you, Bob. Yeah, if you have any comments, if you need, please comment, because part of this show is the thing I love about doing this show. The passion that you hear is because it blows my mind when you begin to understand how you put it together. If we began to understand what we are you allochromatic? Your learning, your training, the education, are you allochromatic or are you idiochromatic? Those of you who know how to fix a car, just look at it. You know, the guy that runs the store in my building, he's a grocer, but he was trained as mechanical engineer and electrical engineer. And one day we was talking about, and he just said, he just blurted out. I'm just like, Mike, where did you learn that? He says, Barry, I always thought about math like that. He is idiochromatic. And because I know that, his value increases. That's what this show is about. Understanding the value of your story. So therefore, if it works, this is where the hypocrisy comes from. If those are the situations of a gemstone, if something is made out of magnesium, iron, silicate, and those of you who don't know, silicon and oxide, that's a part of us. Iron, that's a part of us. So if those principles work the same way, work that way, or described in that way with a basic gemstone, how does it relate to you? Gemstones, people knew about it. This is the breastplate of the high priest. This is in the Bible. There are about 50 different comments about value and strength and durability in the Bible that use gemstones as the classic, the quintessential example of that. So everything that I say on this show, it's not coming from me. It's coming from what is the definition of value. And the only thing I'm asking you to do is translate it to you. What does it mean to you to be allochromatic? To be someone who went to school, who learned different things, who your mama, think about the women, that's just so sexy. Think about the people who can cook, who can just go into a kitchen and just come up with stuff. They learned how to do it. And then of those people, there are some people who are chefs, and because they just think in terms of food, they think in terms of taste and ingredients, because their tongue. Remember the movie, those of you who didn't see it, wonderful Disney movie, Ratatouille. Ratatouille was a rat. He was a rat. And he didn't do all the other stuff that rats do. You know, just rats eat anything. No, Ratatouille was like, no, do you taste the food? Take a moment to taste the ambiance, the significance. When you go to France and eat the food, you can't, no. It's a whole different experience, because people from France, people from different parts of the world, they see food, they see those elements in a completely different way, and they know that if they put those ingredients, those elements into something, and they bake it, they cook it, they fry it, they whatever do it, and you put it in your mouth, those elements are now a part of who you are, and you manifest that. You interact with the light differently because of those elements that's inside of you, because of what is who it is, a part of who you are. Peridot was mined for 3,500 years. That means before the first century. Cleopatra was around, 30 to 65, but not that long, 35 to 65 BC. This was her second favorite gemstone, peridot. In fact, peridot has been known for 3,500 years. They forgot about peridot for about a couple hundred years. It wasn't until the 1900s that peridot came back. But it didn't lose its value just because we forgot about it. That peridot is still peridot. That is why the importance of understanding your story. Peridot, if it was a living being, would understand, I'm peridot. Yes, I'm green because that's all I can be, is green. I'm a black man. I can't be anything else. I wasn't given in it. Being an African American, a person of color, is who I am. So by virtue of that, I am idiochromatic. I am like a peridot. No, I may not be the hardest substance. No, I was born in challenging environments, but I still survived. And part of the reason I survived is because of the molecular structure. And that's the beauty. That's the thing that makes gemstones jealous of people if they could be, because a diamond, a ruby, a peridot will forever be that. You and I, as human beings, we have the choice to decide what is going to be part of our molecular structure. That's all it is. A molecular structure. Magnesium iron silicate, peridot. The progression or regression, the value of a property placed in the context of either higher or lesser value will increase or decrease respectively by that association. So once you understand, the only way you understand your value is you have to understand your story. So I hope you enjoyed today. My name again is Barry B. Mixon, and I am a gemological storyteller. And each week I ask you just to take a moment in your day, in your life, to figure out the value of your own stories. So until next time, au revoir, atatella, see you later. Bye-bye.